Hi, I'm Ollie. I got an A star in A-Level Politics and have been running Politics Explained for a few years now. Using recent examples is a great way to impress the examiner in A-Level Politics. So today I'm going to be going through 3 really useful examples from the past week or 2 that you can use in your A-Level Politics essays in this year's exam. The first example is that last week the House of Lords backed a social media ban for under-16s in the UK. By 261 votes to 150, peers backed an amendment to the government's Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill, which would have given the government 12 months to decide which platform should be restricted and would require highly effective age checks. And it was supported by across the House of Lords by Conservative, Liberal Democrat and crossbench peers, as well as some Labour peers. This can be a really useful example that you can use for how Parliament, particularly the House of Lords, is unrepresentative in terms of age and the impact this has. The average age of the House of Lords is 71, far higher than the general UK population, and we can argue that this has really influenced their how they act and their policy making effectively, as they're less likely to fully understand social media effectively or use it or have connections to under 16s who use it, whereas most people who would be affected by this, under 16-year-olds, certainly wouldn't support it. So this really shows how the Lords' lack of descriptive representation in terms of age weakens its democratic legitimacy and arguably means it's unable to represent the UK population effectively. So for a question in the UK government paper on how effective Parliament is in terms of representation, you can use this as a really useful example. The next example you can use is that on the 14th of January, Parliament debated an e-petition calling for an immediate general election in the UK. The petition reached over 1 million signatures and was debated less than 2 years into the new Labour government. So the system of e-petitions effectively is that when it receives 10,000 signatures, it triggers a government's response, and when it gets 100,000 signatures, it allows consideration for debate by the Petitions Committee. So this has been signed by over 1 million people in the UK and was then debated effectively. And on the one hand, you could argue this is a really good example of direct democracy and direct participation in UK politics, and that actually we don't have a participation crisis because people across the country, voters, are getting involved in ways such as this where they can directly get involved. However, I think actually the more persuasive argument you can use here is against e-petitions. So an e-petition like this, it's going to have no impact. It's kind of pointless effectively. People have gone and signed it, and yes, it does demonstrate that they don't like the government, but it's not really affecting politics in the UK. It's not really kind of holding the government to account or really kind of having an influence on issues. Therefore, we can argue that it's an example of slacktivism, which is kind of low effort participation with little real impact, which isn't a replacement